In Texas, they're going hog wild over wild hogs. The feral animals are causing hundreds of millions of dollars of damage to crops across the state.
There is trail camera footage from Blanco County, Texas, that was never cleared for public release. The moment you understand what it captured, you will know exactly why. It was not a malfunction. It was not a routine animal crossing. It was something moving through the brush at 2 in the morning with a precision that had no business existing in a wild animal. Something so deliberate, so coordinated, that a room full of trained wildlife biologists watched the same 30 seconds loop on a screen and went completely silent. Not because they were confused, because they understood it perfectly, and it dismantled nearly everything they had spent their careers building. Once you see what they saw, the feral hog crisis in this country will never read the same way again. The invasion. It started in the 1500s, and it started on purpose. Spanish explorers pushing up the Gulf Coast released domesticated pigs into the American interior as a calculated logistical move. Leave animals behind. Return later. Find food waiting. Clean, efficient, practical. The pigs did not wait. They spread without resistance. They multiplied without ceiling. No predator large enough to challenge them. No disease evolved against them. No ecological pressure of any kind capable of slowing what was already building beneath the surface. By the time anyone understood the scale of what had been set in motion, it had been building for generations. Then came the second wave. In the early 20th century, wealthy European hunters began importing Eurasian wild boar into the United States for sport. These were not softened farm animals. They were lean, dense, and built across centuries of survival in some of the most unforgiving terrain on the continent. Longer legs, layered muscle, tusks shaped not for display but for killing. When those animals broke out of their enclosures, and they always broke out, they found the feral domestic pigs already roaming free across the interior. They bred. What came out of that crossing was worse than either parent. Stronger than the farm pig, smarter than the wild boar, more adaptive than anything the continent had previously faced. It carried the domestic pig's reproductive capacity and the Eurasian boar's aggression, territorial memory, and survival intelligence, assembled entirely by accident, released without opposition, given centuries to establish. Now pay close attention to the reproduction math. A single sow drops 2 litters per year, up to 12 piglets per litter. Left alone, a feral hog population can double in under 5 months. Not years. Not a full growing season. 5 months. The USDA currently estimates 6.9 million feral hogs across the United States. Texas alone holds roughly 2.6 million, distributed across 253 of its 254 counties. The single exception is El Paso. This is not a wildlife nuisance. This is a continental occupation. The animal is engineered for permanence. Feral hogs run at 30 miles per hour. They clear 40-inch fences without breaking stride. Their tusks exceed 6 inches. Their skin runs over an inch thick, reinforced by a cartilaginous plate that deflects light ammunition. Rounds that drop a deer redirect off a mature boar before reaching the vitals. Researchers at Texas A&M and the National Wildlife Research Center put the annual damage figure for Texas alone at over $500 million. Nationally, the number approaches $3 billion. Crops stripped overnight. Wetlands destabilized by rooting that outpaces any recovery timeline. Native plant communities reduced to bare soil in a single pass. They have overrun military installations, forced pilots to abort runway departures, torn through suburban neighborhoods, and shredded underground infrastructure. In 2019, a woman in Harris County was killed by feral hogs outside her own home. In Williamson County, a farmer walked out at sunrise and found 24 acres of standing corn reduced to nothing. $40,000 gone before the first hour of the day. All of that documented. All of that ongoing. While something else was already operating in the dark that no hog management program in the country had thought to look for. The failure. For decades, the official response looked like this: trap them, shoot them, push them off your land and onto your neighbors. Repeat. It did not work. Norman farmed over 740 acres in central Texas. He had worked that ground long enough to understand its rhythms: when the soil was ready, when the crop lines were vulnerable, when to be standing at the field edge at first light. He watched feral hogs tear through a grain field he had spent 4 months building. 3 acres in a single night. Not partially damaged. Gone. Fence posts driven sideways, irrigation lines in pieces, soil churned a foot deep in places, rendered completely useless. He set cage traps loaded with fermented corn. He called in dog teams trained specifically for hog pursuit. He contracted professional removal crews with years of experience across dozens of Texas properties. The hogs moved to neighboring land, waited a few days, and came back smarter. They had learned. They always do. Here is what most reporting never explains about the trap problem. Feral hogs are not simply difficult to catch. They are actively suspicious of anything newly introduced into their environment. Experienced trappers have documented watching an entire sounder, 15, 20 animals, circle a freshly set cage for 20 minutes before walking away from the bait without a single animal making contact. These animals carry social memory. They share threat information within the group. Catch a portion of a sounder and let the rest escape, and that group will never approach a similar structure again. Not next week. Not ever. One chance. And most programs were burning it. Aerial hunting appeared to close the gap. A single flight team can sweep 400,000 acres in days, removing more animals in one afternoon than a ground crew manages across a month. The initial numbers looked promising, but for every herd cleared from a ranch in Kimball County, 2 more moved in from the eastern brush. Cleared land refilled within a season. The math never shifted. Wildlife researcher Bruce Leland committed it plainly to writing after 2 decades in the field. Every traditional method is temporary. The ones that escape produce dozens more piglets before the next removal cycle. But here is the part nobody wanted to put in a budget justification. The methods were not just failing. In many cases, they were accelerating the problem. Aggressive trapping and sustained aerial pressure do not reduce hog numbers at scale. They scatter them. Animals that survive a removal operation disperse across wider territory, push into counties that had been stable, and seed new populations in ground that had not been touched. Every helicopter operation that cleared one property was, in effect, planting the problem in 3 others. A single coordinated aerial operation over a large Texas ranch runs $20,000 before one animal is confirmed down. The USDA spent over $100 million on feral hog control nationwide across the last decade. The population kept climbing. There is a line that moves through wildlife management circles in the South. Two kinds of counties in Texas: those with a hog problem and those that are about to have one. Nobody laughs at it anymore. $3 billion in annual damage. Every solution renting time it never fully owned. And somewhere in the same Texas brush at 2 in the morning, something was moving on a trail camera that none of those conference rooms had ever put on an agenda. The revelation. Go back to the Blanco County card. Infrared. Green and white. Brush at the edges. Total silence at 2 a.m. This was supposed to be a routine pull. One technician, one memory card, one entry in a database tracking hog movement patterns across the most damaged state in the country. Nothing about it was supposed to stop anyone cold. But the footage on that card was the end of a thread that had been unraveling since around 2014, when field researchers working the Texas Hill Country began finding something they could not explain with the tools they had. Feral hog nests, the shallow ground beds where sows shelter newborn piglets, were turning up empty, not tripped by any trap, not raided by hunters. Physically excavated, cleaned, no equipment marks, no human boot prints, disturbed earth and nothing else, happening repeatedly across multiple counties in zones where no active removal operation had been deployed. That pattern was what put Dr. Michael Bodenchuk on his knees in the cold hill country dirt one morning. Bodenchuk was a wildlife services biologist who had spent years reading hog sign across this region. He studied every impression surrounding an empty nest bed and worked through the complete list of large predators with any established presence in the area. Bears, wrong paw geometry, no hill country population capable of that frequency, mountain lions, wrong depth at the perimeter, wrong spacing. He worked through the list methodically. He came out the other side with something that made no structural sense. The tracks were small, compact, evenly spaced, coyote tracks. He called his regional director before he even logged the sample. Here is the problem with that finding. A 30-pound coyote has no rational basis for confronting a 200-pound feral sow. The math of that encounter is suicidal. A sow defending piglets will charge without hesitation. She can crush or gore a coyote in seconds. Every field manual ever written on the subject classified coyotes as scavengers, opportunists, animals that cleaned up after the real predators moved on. That was the accepted model. It had held for decades. The trail cameras were showing something else entirely. The Blanco County infrared footage shows coyotes moving through brush at 2 a.m. Not scattered, not foraging, moving in formation. The lead animal drops low, ears just clearing the grass line, approaching the nest from downwind so the mother cannot catch the scent. Two more coyotes hold flanking positions on either side, waiting. The sow leaves the nest to forage. There are minutes in that window, maybe less. They move. Dr. Sarah Vance, a USDA wildlife biologist who had tracked feral hog migration patterns for over a decade, watched that sequence play 3 times alone in her office before she allowed herself to accept what she was looking at. One coyote held the perimeter, body angled toward the sow's exit path. A second tested the scent of the piglets. Then, in a single coordinated burst, the flanking animals closed from both sides. One precise bite to the back of the neck. The piglet went still. It was inside the tree line before the mother completed her turn. 5 seconds, start to finish. This was not a lucky grab. This was an operation. Laboratory confirmation came from Fort Hood. Researchers captured 18 coyotes operating in known hog territory and submitted them for necropsy. Dr. Justin French led the analysis team. He described the atmosphere in the lab before the first results came back. Everyone already understood what the data was going to show. Nobody wanted to be the first one to say it. Nearly a third of those 18 coyotes carried undigested feral hog piglet tissue in their stomachs. Fresh, not scavenged. Killed within the previous 12 hours. In Georgia, Wildlife Services found piglet DNA in over 30% of coyote scat samples collected statewide. This was not an isolated incident in one county. This was a pattern running across multiple states simultaneously, entirely under the radar of every program designed to address the problem it was quietly solving. The hunting machine. The technique has a name in the research literature: high-risk micropredation. The way it operates does not read like animal behavior. It reads like a prepared operation with assigned roles. Coyotes never engage adult hogs directly. A mature sow or boar outweighs them 6 to 1 and can kill in seconds. The coyotes understand this calibration precisely. Instead, they engineer chaos. A lead animal sprints past the edge of a nest just fast enough that the sow cannot catch it, and just close enough to scatter the piglets in multiple directions at once. The sow becomes 200 pounds of fury, trying to simultaneously track movement, identify the primary threat, and commit to a direction. She is chasing the wrong target. While she is turning, the flanking animals hit from both sides. One bite. The piglet goes still. They are back in the tree cover before the sow completes her rotation. Before 2010, this behavior essentially does not appear in the documented record at meaningful scale. Trail cameras across Texas and Georgia are now capturing it in coordinated groups of 3 and 4 animals, each with a defined function: distraction, blocker, executioner. That is wolf-level tactical organization coming out of an animal most people associate with raiding backyard trash. The timing adaptation is even more striking. Most coyotes hunt across the full span of night, but specific groups operating in high hog-density territory have shifted their primary window to early dawn, the exact period when sows are most physically drained after a full night of foraging, when reaction time is at its lowest and nest defense is at its weakest. The coyotes found that biological window and engineered their timing around it. Trail cameras show strikes clustering in the hour before and after sunrise with a consistency that eliminates coincidence. This is not instinct. Instinct does not produce assigned roles, coordinated flanking approaches, or timing optimized around a prey species fatigue cycle. This is learned behavior moving through coyote family groups, the way information moves through human communities, not through genetics, but through observation, repetition, and demonstration. Dr. Bodenchuk described it as the most sophisticated adaptive behavioral shift he had encountered across 20 years of fieldwork. The ecological pressure driving it, he noted, was almost certainly human-caused. Decades of predator control had stripped the coyote's traditional food base across entire regions. Those populations were forced to innovate or starve. Right alongside them in every direction sat the largest undefended prey surplus on the continent: unguarded piglets, produced by the millions each breeding cycle, invisible to every other predator in the ecosystem. The coyotes did not overlook them. They built a system to reach them. In Texas, documented piglet losses to coyote predation have doubled over the last decade. In sections of Oklahoma and Georgia, feral hog populations have declined by 20% in zones of sustained coyote activity. No government program, no helicopter contract, no trap line. The mistake here is where it lands like a punch. While this was unfolding, while coyotes were quietly running a generational correction that no funded program had come close to achieving, the government was paying hunters to remove them. From 2017 to 2020, multiple states offered bounties of up to $75 per coyote. In Kerr County, Texas, coyotes were reduced by over 60% through state-funded targeted removal. Inside 3 years, the feral hog population in that county tripled. Bodenchuk reviewed those numbers and described what the experience felt like. The county had spent money eliminating the one thing that was working. They were removing the cure. The bounty programs were not a solution. They were dismantling the correction mechanism while the problem expanded on every side. Texas has since moved toward a coordinated approach that formally includes protecting coyote populations in high-density hog regions, the first time in the state's wildlife management history. Counties that previously ran active coyote removal alongside hog control have reversed course. Smart traps now line the perimeters of working ranches. Infrared cameras, solar power, wireless feeds to a phone application. A rancher 100 miles from his property can watch hogs enter the pen in real time, wait until every animal in the sounder is inside the frame, and drop the gate with one button press. In Atascosa County, a coalition of ranchers combining smart traps with coyote-protected land management watched annual crop losses fall from 600 acres of destroyed corn to nearly zero inside 2 growing seasons. But every researcher who has spent serious time on this problem now understands something no budget line can fully replicate. No trap replaces what coyotes do. No helicopter matches their cost efficiency. No toxin operates 7 nights a week in every weather condition without maintenance or logistics. Traps catch adults. Helicopters push herds. Coyotes hit the generational cycle, removing the next population before it exists, in the dark, in places no camera crew will ever reach. Dr. Vance put it plainly in her most recent field report. The coyotes are not a supplement to our strategy. They are the strategy. Everything else is support. The 30 seconds of Blanco County infrared footage did not change things because it was shocking. It changed things because it was undeniable. A 30-pound animal executing a precision predation sequence that none of the programs, none of the budgets, and none of the accumulated institutional knowledge had come close to replicating, running on camera in real time 30 miles from the offices where the eradication line items were still being written. The most damaging invasive species in American history had an answer. The answer had been present the whole time. The agencies responsible had been paying to shut it down. There is still footage being reviewed from operations across Texas that has not been cleared for release. Counties where the shift in coyote behavior has been running long enough that the hog population data is beginning to reflect something nobody has publicly confirmed yet. That is the next story. Subscribe now, because what was caught on that Blanco County card is only the opening frame of what is still being found out there in the dark.